Welcome to the Enlighten Up podcast. I'm Lisa Watson and we'll be joined by my co-host Nicole Frolick and Brian Koenigberg. The Enlighten Up podcast is a weekly show that provides an unconventional and refreshing spin on spirituality, where three friends and weekly guests share informative, fun, and usually off-the-wall conversations. Unlike others, we provide fringe and skeptical viewpoints on all topics, because our experience has taught us that the echo chamber is a boring place from which to learn. So regardless of where you are in your spiritual journey, we can promise you're going to find a place to fit in here. So we invite you to grab a drink and listen in on our casual, entertaining, and hopefully enlightening conversation. And Enlighten Up is a self-funded podcast, so if you would like to help us to continue to be able to produce, enhance, and expand the show for our audience, then please send your support using the link in the show notes, or go to our website, enlightenup.us, and check out our merchandise shop, where you can purchase merchandise that will allow you to express some spiritual humor. You may also show your support by leaving us a review on iTunes and following us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Thank you all so much for listening and supporting us, and now let's jump right into the episode.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Enlighten Up podcast. So happy to be back with you again this week. I am Nicole Frolick, one of your co-hosts, and I am also joined by Lisa and Brian. And today we have two new guests joining the call. We have Trish and Rob MacGregor, who are both professional writers for over 30 years. You may know Rob's work as he wrote The Indiana Jones and The Last Crusade, as well as 6 other original Indiana Jones novels, which of course have sold millions of copies around the world. He won the coveted Edgar Award for Prophecy Rock, a YA mystery, and its sequel, Hawk Moon, was an Edgar finalist. Trish has also won the Edgar in 2003 for her best original paperback for Out of Sight. It is so exciting to have you both here on the podcast with us today. How are you both doing?
We're good, and thank you for having us.
So nice. You guys are down in Florida, and you were just telling us it's quite chilly today down in Florida.
It is. We're not used to this. It's nice for a change.
Overnight, it was 39 degrees in West Palm Beach, so that's pretty cool.
Oh my gosh, do you even have clothes for that kind of weather?
Not really.
We wear them once a year.
How many bikinis do you have to put on to stay warm in that kind of weather?
Yeah, really. Like, okay, where are my long sleeves?
Made of fur.
Well, this is really exciting. I'm a huge fan of the Indiana Jones, the movies. I haven't read the books, I am very ashamed to say, but I have watched the movies. Rob, what was that like for you to write those? How did that all come about?
A synchronicity.
It's a mystery, you know. I mean, it's just, I had written a couple novels based on scripts for an editor who was working with a writer who couldn't finish a project. So it was a quick deadline, and I agreed to do it, and I did it, finished it. And then she said, well, now that you did that, how would you like to write the novel based on the script of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, which is the third movie? And I said, sure. And we were just heading off to Venezuela at the time for a trip. Trish grew up in Venezuela, and we were heading there. And so I started, we're in the Gran Sabana wilderness in the southern part of Venezuela. And I had my computer with me, and we started working out there. And pretty short deadline of 6 weeks to write the write the novel. So yeah.
That was 6 weeks? Oh my God.
So what they do is they gave me a 112-page script, and I had to make a 300-plus page book. So of course I had to add a lot of scenes and also of course the thinking process, which you don't see so much in the movies. And but I managed to make the deadline and came out just in time for the movie.
Wow,
and then
that's pretty cool.
Do some original.
And then it got on the New York Times bestseller list, and they asked me if I'd like to write some original Indiana Jones novels. So we talked about it and decided to work with the Indiana Jones in the 1920s, the decade before the movies. So I covered the 1920s for when Indy starts his career as an archaeologist.
We got to see Skywalker Ranch, which was amazing. And,
very cool.
this was in the days before they had any security, really. So our daughter was still an infant. So I always tell her, well, you're probably one of the few babies who got to crawl around this incredible occult library. Yeah, Skywalker Ranch.
And we just drove in there, drove around. We didn't know where we were, and nobody stopped us. Nobody said anything to us. We were just wandering around. Finally found where we were supposed to go. And but then the second time I went there, then they had moved from Skywalker Ranch to the Presidio in San Francisco, and it was like a prison camp. Every 500 feet, somebody's out checking your ID, and it's like a college campus in a way, but a very high security one.
Oh wow! And how long did it take you to write each novel?
Each novel I had 4 months to write. The novels I would start with I gave Lucas about 2-page summary of what I would do, and he pretty much approved my ideas and rejected a couple of them. But then I had 4 months, and as soon as I finished that one, the next day I started on the next one. This was before the internet. There was a lot of research. India, of course, was an international traveler, and but fortunately I had done a lot of international traveling in my younger years, and I had actually started out in college with the plans of becoming an archaeologist. I started studying anthropology, and that was my plan. So nobody knew that, though, about with either the publisher or the Lucasfilm. It just happened to be a nice synchronicity, coincidence, a meaningful coincidence for me. And so when I had traveled, I had gone to Mexico, Central America, South America, Europe, Northern Africa, and I'd always gone to the ruins because that's what interested me. I'd switched to journalism in my junior year because I knew there was going to be a lot easier time finding a job as a newspaper reporter, editor, than working as an archaeologist, which has limited opportunities. And so I had a lot of background information for the novels just from my experience of traveling.
So give us the truth. What is your opinion on the books versus the movies? Were you happy? Were you happy with how they put out the movies?
Well, the one that, the only one of the movies that I was directly related with was The Last Crusade. And when I watched it, it was like, whoa, what happened? It seemed like it was over so fast, because what Spielberg did is he took that 112-page script and condensed it. He took scenes out. And what I did was just the opposite. I added scenes. And so for me, it just went by really fast. And I just thought, wow, there's all this stuff missing. And I realized, well, that's because I wrote that stuff, that wouldn't be in the movie. But,
right.
So I had a picture in my mind of a different story.
Right, because you wrote it after the script was already created. The movie wasn't done yet, but the script was already created.
Exactly. Right.
Right.
Yeah. So it's a novel based on a script.
And tell them about the old man. Yeah, this is kind of an interesting side.
So when my original plan was to start with Indiana Jones as an old man, 90 years old, and he introduces the story. He's has an eye patch. He's got a cane and a little dog. And he starts talking about introducing the story, and then we go into the story. And then at the end of the story, we see him again as the story closes. That was my plan for the novels. George Lucas said, nobody wants to see an old Indiana Jones, so cut that out. So 5 years later or so, this Young Indiana Jones series starts on television, which was a good series, kind of educational in a way, and well done. And it began with a 90-year-old Indiana Jones with an eye patch, a cane, and a little dog. And ended with that guy.
Yeah, sometimes people aren't so ready for greater ideas or ideas that go beyond their thinking. Takes a while. Takes a while for those to permeate in.
You saw the future.
5 years.
Well, Brian's, you saying that they saw the future. Let's talk about that, because both of you have had an incredible amount of synchronicities happen to you throughout your time together. Let's start off, like, how did you two meet? Was it a synchronistic event, how you two came together?
Yeah, I think it was in a lot of ways. This was right after the Mariel boat lift, where something like 200,000 refugees from Cuba had arrived. And the government started a federal program through Florida International University. They were funding it to see how many of these, anyway, it was a free program for Marielitos, as they were called, so they could learn English. And everybody was afraid of the Marielitos in Dade and Broward County. So it took us like 3 months to even find a center in Broward County, in Lauderdale. But anyway, once we got in there, geared up, Rob, who was a journalist at the time for a local newspaper, came to see if the students were actually learning English. And I was impressed with him, and I asked him to come back to show some of the slides of his South American trips to the students. And afterwards, we were talking, and I said, "Hey, do you know what synchronicity is?" And he said,
"Yeah." I said, "Yeah, I've heard of it. I'm not real clear about it, but yeah, I've heard the term." And so that was how we started off.
Yeah, that was my test question.
And yeah, she asked me about synchronicity, and actually, we also found out that we were both interested in getting out of our jobs. I'd been a journalist for about 11, 12 years at that point, and I was ready to move on because I had an editor who would make anything that was slightly difficult, making it extra difficult, and just to spite the writers, it seemed. And I was about fed up with that situation. And so for me, I wanted to get off on a freelance career, and Trish had already written 6 unpublished novels at the time, and she just handed me her 6th novel called In Shadow, and I read it over, and I suggested some changes that she could make, and she did rewrite it and send it in, and that was her first novel that sold. And so
we started freelancing.
Yeah,
basically.
Actually, we had started freelancing before. We saved about $5,000, quit both of our jobs, and just headed off to South America. Actually, went to Ecuador and Chile for a while, and went to a cool place called Chiloé, an island off of the south of Chile. Spent some time there, and went back and worked.
And probably ran out of money.
Yeah. we're actually writing magazine articles and selling them, but the pay was low and the pay was slow. And so we both took part-time jobs, Trish teaching English as a second language at night school at Fort Lauderdale High School. And I worked as a journalist for a weekly paper part-time for 20 hours a week or so. We did that for a year. Trish's novel sold, and we got a nonfiction project to ghostwrite a book for a corporate executive in Washington, D.C. And
that was it.
That was it. We quit our part-time jobs, and that was been working as freelancers ever since.
And away you went.
Yeah, exactly.
We hooked into. I don't know if you're familiar with Omni magazine.
Yes.
It was a science magazine, but it was more than a science magazine. It included some fiction, short stories, and
it had the red page.
In the center of the Omni magazine were these red pages called antimatter, and we were hired to write articles for the antimatter section, and it paid well, and that really helped us out until.
And plus, we got to meet interesting people like Bud Hopkins. We covered UFO conferences and met Betty Hill, and sort of made our inroads that way.
Oh, really? So, you guys talk a lot about synchronicities and different psychic phenomenon. What is the Synchro Highway?
The Synchronicity Highway is, it's that was a book that came after, I think we did Synchronicity. We did 7 Secrets of Synchronicity. Then we did Synchronicity and the Other Side about spirit contact and how synchronicity is a component of that. And then we did the Synchronicity Highway, which is basically more stories about synchronicity, not types of, but the kinds of experiences that people have.
And also a factor of it is travel synchronicities.
Mm-hmm.
When people travel and they get out of their regular routines and new things are happening to them all the time, this is when synchronicities often happen. If you notice synchronicities, if you don't pay attention to coincidences, it just kind of flies over your head and you ignore it. But if you start to pay attention when you're traveling, that they often happen.
Oh, really?
Strange
because
coincidences.
Lisa is doing like a 365-day challenge where she's challenging herself to do something different every day.
Oh, wow.
So
Have you had
I haven't.
synchronicities?
I haven't really noticed any synchronicities, but I definitely move outside my comfort zone on a regular basis.
what do you mean you don't see any synchronicities? From everything you've told me, it's just like one thing after another.
Tell me about them, Nicole. I'm like, I don't know. I don't think of it as of anything that's happened as a synchronicity, I guess.
Well, I mean, if you go by Jung's definition of what a synchronicity is, it's when inner and outer events coincide in a way that's outside of cause and effect, and that's meaningful to the person who experiences it.
So
it's like a meaningful coincidence. But
in fact, that book you were talking about, I was just paging through that book about a week or so ago because we had another podcast we were doing, and I noticed that we had a chapter called Critter Coincidences, and I turned to that, and so it's all about synchronicities related to animals, and I noticed there's one section about flies. And I said, what did we write about flies? I couldn't remember, and so I was reading this section about some crazy synchronicity about flies when suddenly a fly buzzed right past my nose, and so that's that was kind of a trickster synchronicity is what I would call that.
Yeah, like I'm so amazed right now. It's like with Lisa, like when I just think about you got those paths to try all those different things, and every day you were like doing a new thing, and something always came out of each different one.
Right, but I don't think of that as a synchronicity. What was synchronistic about that?
Well, each one was very meaningful to you. In a way, like it felt like something was speaking to you through each experience.
Yeah, I guess I just have a more limited view or definition of synchronicity. Like the fly one, that makes total sense to me. Like you're thinking of a fly and then a fly shows up. That's how more I think of a synchronicity. That does make sense to me.
Yeah,
but
right. Because
in what?
Two similar things that are unrelated. Yeah.
Well, for instance, here's one that happened to us. Sometimes you don't get the message for a while. And we had taken our daughter, it was her 20th birthday. She wanted to go skydiving. So we drove out to the middle of the state. No, I'm sorry, that's ahead. Wait a minute. We were taking her back to college in Sarasota. That's where it started. And we were coming home that evening, and it was dusk. And this road to Sarasota from the East Coast is really just sugarcane fields and pretty much wilderness. And there were all these swallows that were coming in really low over the road, and 2 of them hit our windshield. And I thought at the time, oh my God, this has got to mean something, not something good either. So 11 days later, we took Megan to go skydiving.
Which is very close to that.
Yeah, very close to where we had hit these swallows. And it's a tandem, so notice 11 days later, that's 1 and 1, 2. It's her 20th birthday. She was supposed to jump, I think, at 12:30, but it turned out to be at 2, and it was a tandem jump, 2 people again. And we're standing out there watching, and something happened.
Standing next to a trainer, and he looks up and says, "Oh wow, look at that! They released their parachute. It didn't open, and they released it, and they're falling. And fortunately, the backup chute opened.
The second chute.
Yeah, the second chute opened. But he's very calmly saying, "Wow, look at that!"
Where they're freaking out on the ground.
They released their.
So that was a synchronicity that involved two. 20th birthday, the tandem jump, 2 p.m., the second chute. So I think that's what the two swallows meant.
Unfortunately, when they landed, they didn't splat like the birds on the windshield.
Oh, that's
Yeah, I thought that was the punchline there. That was the
No. Oh my God, no. I'd be weeping if that was the case. But that to me, I mean, we didn't understand what that meant until 11 days later when the parachuting happened. So that's how, sometimes you don't know immediately.
But sometimes they happen instantaneously. Like another time, maybe we were in Caracas at the airport. We were heading back to Miami. And it was at a time when the Colombian drug lords were pushing a lot of cocaine through Caracas because they were getting stopped going from the ports in Colombia. And so there was a lot of high tension and soldiers with machine guns standing around. And so we were coming up we wanted to get on our plane. They said, "Okay, open up your luggage," and which we did. And they're searching through it. And there's a guy right in front of us, and he's a tall guy in a 3-piece suit, and all he has is a briefcase. And he sets it down and they say, "Okay, open it up." And
the situation was tense.
Yeah, it was very tense. These kids are like 16, 17 years old with machine guns leaning forward. And we had packed our stuff up, and we were kind of looking over there too. And he unlatches his briefcase, opens up, and there's only one thing in the briefcase. It's a novel called Fevered, and Trish wrote that novel. And
under a pseudonym.
Yeah, and she's Allison Drake, and she's standing right behind him. It's so strange. Why did he have this briefcase with only her book in? He closed it, went off. We never had a chance to talk to him, and
we don't know.
but it was very strange.
Wow.
It was a very fevered situation there, actually. And what was the chance that he would open up that book and that briefcase and have a book that Trish wrote in?
1 in a million.
Yeah, at least.
It is a synchronicity. I
Yeah.
understand.
Yeah, it is. That's probably one of the most powerful synchros we've ever had. I mean, it was just so in your face,
Yeah, but sometimes in these synchronicities, there's a feeling that comes about that comes into play. For example, I used to be a big windsurfer, and one of the places I went windsurfing was a lake in our neighborhood. And, we lived another place to the south of here. And one day it was really windy, and I was really rushing to get out. I only had a short amount of time. I jumped on my board to go out, but I was wearing shorts, and I forgot my billfold. It was in my back pocket, and I went down at one point, and it must have fallen out the bottom of the lake. And so when I finished, I'm looking all over for my billfold and wondering, did I have it in my pocket? And I look around the house for it. I can't find it. And I'm thinking it must have been I must have lost it in the lake. But I had this odd feeling that billfold was going to come back to me. And I was just so certain about it.
And I was bugging him, you report your license stolen,
the credit cards. I didn't do anything. It was just, I didn't have any reason to believe this, but it just was this very strong feeling that was coming back. So like 3-4 days go by, I get a telephone call from a guy. He said he was out fishing in that lake with a net, and he came up with my billfold. And he said, I'm glad I'm talking to you, because I thought you might be at the bottom of that lake too. And I said, "No, I'm here."
Jeez.
And so we made an arrangement for me to pick up his billfold. So I go over to his house. It's a Sunday morning. He's an Indian guy, and he's having this party with these Indian people, and they have this music and Indian food. And I'm walking around, and there's like 3 guys with the same name, and I'm looking around for him, and finally found him. And I look at him and said, "Wait a minute, I've met you before." He had come about 2 weeks earlier. He had come to the house, and he has a lawn service company, and he was looking for new business. So I had talked to him and met him. Our dog is
Sorry, our dog was trying to grab the frisbee.
doing something underneath.
Here, let me have it. Let me have it. No.
So that was unusual synchronicity, because that feeling was involved that I didn't feel like I needed to, start, getting back my cards and my driver's license and everything. And it turned out that.
But there's a synchronicity that you met him the week before.
Yeah, and I met the guy too. That was like a double synchronicity.
Wow. Now, do you attribute the knowing that you had that billfold was going to come back to you? Do you attribute part of that to believing, like just really putting it in your reality that you're just going to believe that it comes back and that's why it did? Or do you believe that it's due to something else beyond your control? Like, what are your thoughts on all of that?
No, it was something else. It wasn't that, I would have been in a normal situation. I would have, started applying for a new driver's license and new credit cards. It wasn't that, I think I'm just going to wait till it turns up. But that's what I did because I really felt that it would. I had another situation like that where our cat was missing for like several days, a cat named Fox. And Trish said, I know something's happened to that cat. She never has gone like this. And I said, she's going to be back by midnight Saturday. I don't know why I felt that. I said that. I just felt it. Midnight Saturday, our next door neighbor knocks on our door holding our cat. She had found it out in the courtyard. And it was right to the minute. These things don't happen to me. Let me say, these things don't happen to me all the time. Those were 2 times in 30 years, where something that extraordinary happened. But I kind of wish that would happen more often. But
wow.
So it's a feeling. It's a feeling that
it's intuitive.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
It's seeing the future. Some of that. Knowing that when your cat's going to come back.
Right.
Exactly. True.
Or it was just a lucky guess.
Well, yeah, we don't. Well, I don't know. Brian, do you still believe in lucky guesses, or
Yes. Some of these things, when I listen to them, that's a coincidence. Some of them are synchronicities, but some things have got to be just a coincidence.
Yeah, I think there's a validity to that.
I have come around to not everything is a coincidence, which is where I started.
Right. Yeah, that's true. We've had people who have told, written us, here's a great synchronicity that happened to me. And Rob and I read it and go, huh? We just don't see the connection. But the person who experienced it does. But, there are also other types of synchronicities that people who don't experience it but who read about it or hear about it get it immediately.
Yeah.
Some of those are like,
Yeah, no, there are some people who are a little bit
they're big.
Bit mentally deranged who have talked about synchronicity. They don't make any sense except to them. And we hear from these people. And
I'm sure you get letters and emails from all walks of life.
Yeah. So that, it's so tricky though, because we get questions like, well, is God behind synchronicity? Is it an internal thing? Can you create a synchronicity? What we feel is that, if you look at quantum physics and go back to David Bohm, he had this theory that the implicate order is the order beneath what we see, and that the
an underlying reality. Yeah.
And that the explicate order is what unfolds from that inner order. It's like our daily life. And what we think is that synchronicity really lies on the border between the two. So it's our most accessible tool or venue into who we are.
And a synchronicity gives us a little peek into this world that exists outside of time and space and cause and effect.
I like that. That makes a lot of sense to me.
Like maybe merging timeline type of thing?
Yeah. You know, have you guys heard of the Mandela Effect?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay, when I first read about this, I thought, wow, what is this? And now I'm beginning to think there's apparently a movie out called The Mandela Effect or something like that. And it's about this phenomena. And maybe that's what reality is. You know, people have different perceptions about the same event.
Well, yeah, I mean that it really depends on what lens you're looking through at the time, because
Yes, it does.
you know what, one person, two people could be standing right beside each other and see two completely different things. In fact, I was reading your book, and I think you were talking about that in how there was like a cattle. Was it a cattle?
That was Einstein.
Yeah. Okay.
Remember
You were.
that theory about Einstein? Yeah, the cattle field, the field of cows.
Oh yeah, you're right. Yeah, yeah. There.
I shouldn't just do a blank here.
There's a cows lined up along a fence, and the
farmer sees one thing.
The farmer sees.
Let me find it.
You know, what is it?
So there was like a synchronous. What I think.
Tell us what's in our book.
So what I think I saw is that Einstein saw all of the cattle move in unison together at one time,
right.
But the farmer saw them move one at a time.
One at a time. Right.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, and related to.
And the farmer was, because he was standing at the opposite end of the field, he'd seen something different. He'd seen the cows jump away one by one. And this was actually a dream that Einstein had. And out of this came his theory of relativity, I think, yeah.
Yeah.
From the different perspectives.
Right.
And the speed of light, and how, depending on where you are, you'll see things differently at a different speed.
Right.
So I'm curious, because I know you've talked about it in your new book, Phenomenon. What was your first experience, either of you, with apparitions?
First experience?
I'm
trying to think here. That's a good question.
Yeah.
I honestly don't know what my first experience was.
Well, I have experiences when people die. I have seen them. Like a friend of mine from high school, he had a very dry sense of humor, and I was kind of I wasn't dreaming, I was awake, but I just had an image of him came to me, and he looks at me and he says, "I'm dead now," and in his usual dry sense of humor. And then a couple of days later, I found out that he was dead. He died in a car accident. My cousin died of brain cancer, and I hadn't been really in touch with him, but I knew he was very sick. And I had a dream. This was a dream. But it was a very lucid dream. Like I felt I was awake, and he was standing right in front of me. He looked very healthy, which seemed strange, and smiled. And he said, "What's happening?" And then he disappeared. And I found out from my sister that he had just died. And so those are kind of.
Also, when my mother in the last couple of years of her life was in an Alzheimer's unit, and we had moved her into hospice because she had fallen and broken her hip. And I was on the way that day to help her move her things into hospice. And Rob was sitting at his desk and, kind of drowsing off. And all of a sudden he saw my mother waving goodbye. Yeah. And not a minute later, the phone rang at the hospice place and said she had died.
Yeah, I mentioned it to Trish, and then that telephone call came. So it's like I can see the future by a couple of seconds.
When do you get these visions? Like, what kind of state are you in when these visions are kind of coming in?
Well, sometimes it was like dreaming, having a lucid dream different from a regular dream, because it feels like I'm wide awake, yet I'm dreaming. But also when I'm sitting at my desk at my computer and just kind of taking a break or something, and just in a kind of drowsy, half sleep mood, I can hold a cup of coffee in my hand and fall asleep. And I guess it's like that state.
Well, there's also, Rob used to teach he teaches meditation workshops and classes, and during one meditation class, it was an eyes half open meditation class. We were in a small room at the local gym, and I thought, how am I going to do this? How can I meditate with my eyes open? So suddenly, in a corner of the room, I saw my mother, and she was about 35 years old, looked really young, spry, no sign of Alzheimer's or her hip thing. And she was motioning people into this theater. And then she starts waving at somebody, and I see my dad, who had Parkinson's when he died, and he's bopping over to her. And then they both became aware, I think, that I could see them. And the whole thing faded. So in that case, I was in a meditative state, but my eyes were half open. So, and plus I'd been kind of keeping track of their progress through the afterlife through dreams. But this was a real good, this is them.
I find that as soon as you look dead on to something, you lose the vision.
Yeah, maybe that could have been true, because I was sitting there kind of in a state of shock when I saw my parents so young and so vital, But I think that was also may have been their way to say, look, you don't have to keep track of us anymore in your dreams. We're cool.
Yeah, I know what you mean, that by that direct, not having that direct vision, not looking directly at it. It's almost like it's something that is kind of happening in your mind that you might ignore it, or if you tune into it, there it is, and that's what's key. That's what's that spirit side or whatever.
Well, I think one of the things that I've really understood just through experience is that when we kind of look beyond what we're looking at, how like when you kind of go off in a daze, you may be you're looking at, say you could be looking at a chair, but you're really looking way beyond the chair, and you're in that daze. It's because you've completely gone through it, past it, and when you get to that state, that's when you're able to see things in and around you that you wouldn't normally see, because you're not really fixed in on this reality anymore.
Right. Mm-hmm. We see this. We both still write fiction, and I found that when you're really plugged into your story, you often do tune into the future. In the early 90s, I wrote a book called Storm Surge, and it was about a Category 5 hurricane that hit like Miami, South Beach, South Florida, but way at the tip. And the day I mailed that off, Hurricane Andrew had just left the coast of Africa. And 10 days later, as my editor was about to send the book back to me, it hit Homestead and devastated it. There were so many similarities between that hurricane, everything about it, and the hurricane in my book. I thought, I'm never going to write about another hurricane.
And the funny thing is, when that came out, it seemed like she had experienced Hurricane Andrew, and then quickly wrote a novel about it and got it published, and which was which wasn't the way it happened at all. But books don't usually get published that fast and written that fast and published. It was like just.
But then and then I made the big mistake a number of years later. I had an idea for another book that involved a hurricane, and I called that one Category 5. And I thought, I really shouldn't be writing this because something weird is going to happen. But I went ahead and wrote it, and sure enough, 2 months before it's supposed to be released, and again, there were a lot of parallels between the Category 5 storm and this one, and Hurricane Katrina when it hit New Orleans. And I thought, okay, that's it. I really can never write about hurricanes again, because I do seem to tune in on that whatever that energy is, that destructive something.
Or maybe when you're about to write about a hurricane, you should be putting out an SOS to everyone, or some sort of like 411, everyone on alert, something's about to take form.
Well, what happened with that was really strange because it was 2 months before my book was supposed to come out. My editor calls me and she goes, Trish, we're getting a lot of these radio stations need experts on hurricanes. I said, I'm not an expert on it. I'm not a meteorologist. And she said, no, but you've done all the research. You need to go on these shows and publicize your book. I said, my book's not even out yet. But so over a period of 3 days, I did about 40 radio shows. And one of the things in my book that I talked about was climate change. And the minute you mentioned that, this was back in 2005, 2006, the minute I mentioned climate change, I really ran up against a big wall of skepticism. No, climate change is not real. So,
that's kind of changed.
Yeah, that's changed a lot.
So with, you've written also about the Bermuda Triangle and
yeah.
Also a famous Stargate that a remote viewer confirmed. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, I met a man who actually, he contacted me. He read an article about me that was in the Palm Beach Post. It was, I don't know what it was about, maybe about my Indian.
Oh, it's about Billy D. Williams.
Oh, okay. I wrote a couple novels about remote viewing with Billy D. Williams. Actually, I wrote them, and we both had our names on it. He did publicity for him. Books did terrible, but anyhow.
It's fun.
So anyhow, Bruce Gernon contacted me. He's a pilot, and he's had this unusual experience a long time ago, and I think when he was
1970.
Yeah, when he's only 23 years old, in the Bermuda Triangle. And this experience had been on his mind every day since then because it was so strange, moving through time and space from, supposedly he was in the moving towards Bimini in his airplane coming from Andros Island, when suddenly he was over South Beach in Miami. Instantaneously, after going through this very strange cloud and having this, he was trapped inside like a donut of a huge cloud, and he tried to go up above, and it seemed like that cloud went up to 60,000 feet or so. He couldn't go over it. He went down to the ocean, and it seemed to be coming right out of the ocean as well. And it was about like 12 miles. He figured it was about 12 to 15 miles across from the donut hole. And then he sees an opening where the two arms of this cloud are coming together, and it's like a tunnel. So he decides, and he sees blue on the other side. So he looks like that's a way of escaping. So he goes into this, and all the clouds are swirling counterclockwise around him. And as he's going through, and this tunnel is closing down, he comes out on the other side, and there's no more blue sky. There's like this yellow, soupy sky, and all of his electronic equipment goes down. But his radio still worked, and he was able to contact the Miami Tower, and he said where he was, and they said, no, there's nobody out, there's no planes anywhere near Bimini. And his father was also a pilot, and with him and another man as well. And his father became very upset about that, because they just had this brand new airplane and everything working on it. And then suddenly the guy in the tower says, okay, there's a plane coming now right over Miami Beach. And Bruce said, no, that couldn't be us. We're like 100 miles away. And he looks down, and this cloud or this fog around him breaks up, and he's right over Miami Beach. And he doesn't know how he got there that fast. And it was like moving 100 miles instantaneously.
Well, the other part of this was, eventually we ended up flying to Andros with Bruce to meet Bill Burns and some people from, what was it, Alien Hunters, I think?
Yeah, Alien Hunters. I was interviewed. Bruce and I were both interviewed for the television show Alien Hunters, which on the History Channel a few years back, and they were doing an episode on the Bermuda Triangle and also about this secret Navy base on Andros Island called Optek. And
among UFO buffs, it's known as the Underwater Area 51.
Yeah. So we were both interviewed there, and then Bill Burns decides that why don't we try to get into the base? The producers had made several calls and attempts to contact the base, and they wanted to see if they could do an interview with the commander of Optek. But not only did they didn't get a no, they just got no answer at all, or no response at all. But so Burns says, well, let's just go to the gate and go in and see if we can get a tour at least. And so we were in this, all piled into the Jeep with the cameras and several people, and we stopped about 75 yards or so from the gate and got all the equipment ready to and started walking towards the gate when two police cars had showed up, and they approached the gate, and they did something very odd. They went in front of the gate, nose to nose, like blocking the gate. They weren't trying to get in the gate. They were just blocking the gate, the front of the cars virtually touching. And then this black helicopter lifts up from behind the wall and hovers above us, very loud. And we stop, and Bill says, I don't think we're welcome here. So,
but now flip ahead 4 months.
Yeah. Okay. We left then. And so 4 months later, we're taking our daughter to back to college. I think it was her sophomore. To Sarasota, Florida. It was her sophomore year, and helping her set up in her dorm. And so that evening, Trish and I decided to go downtown and get a bite to eat at one of the restaurants. So we go to this place that kind of an open setting. Most of the tables
with music
outside, and there was a live band playing, and it was very crowded on a Friday night. But we found one table open. It was a table high top, and there was two people on the other side, and we asked them. There were two open seats. We asked them if we sit there, and they said sure. So the music stopped, the break between the songs, and we started talking to them. And
now here's the punchline.
Yeah. So the guy we're talking to is the commander, the former commander of Optek, and he had just retired or been transferred or whatever. But in April, this was September, in April, and we were there at Optek and on Andros. He was the commander. The one that UFO hunters wanted to interview, and so here he was sitting at a table right across from us.
So we started talking to him about Optek and
talking about UFOs, and he looks at me and he looks at his girlfriend and says, "I need another drink." And then it seemed like he had something to say, and he scribbled down something on a piece of paper and handed me. It was his email address, and he said, "I want you to contact me." And then he asked Trish and I if we wanted to go with them to another bar, which we should have, but we didn't, and because we were tired, headed back, and somehow I lost that piece of paper and was never able to contact him. So that was a synchronicity, but a trickster synchronicity, because I had that opportunity and I lost it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the whole thing of, you were given this opportunity to go to another bar and you said no, and then you lose it as almost like losing the email. Yeah, it's kind of like a reflection of missing an opportunity there.
Yeah,
I like.
And I mean,
this
whole thing had come full circle. This thing had come full circle. We see the commander there at the table. We talk to him, and then we probably could have gotten a lot more information from him, but maybe we just weren't supposed to know. Whatever.
Now, when you go back to that Bermuda Triangle incident with Bruce, what are your thoughts on it? Do you think it was like a portal, interdimensional time travel? Like, what do you think happened?
Well, there's a lot of different theories about the Bermuda Triangle, and I sort of tend to believe that there's possibly like a mini wormhole or an interdimensional portal there, which might account for the UFOs coming and going, because there's a lot of UFOs have been spotted around there, around Andros Island, around that Navy base, and actually underwater UFOs as well.
We actually we were friends with Joe McMoneagle, who used to be Stargate's Psychic Spy 1.
Mm-hmm.
And when they were in Florida, we asked his wife, who was sort of his monitor with these things now, if she could write something in an envelope the way Joe worked about what happened to him on that flight. Yeah, we wrote it. I guess that was it. And Scooter put it into an envelope. And now when Joe does his remote viewing, he doesn't open the envelope. He doesn't look at anything that you've written down.
He just has a random number on the front, and that's what he goes by.
And he remote viewed that Bruce's plane, that this massive cloud that he had flown into, was actually a UFO.
Yeah, right.
And that he had been abducted, essentially. The plane, Bruce.
No. There was two different things we gave him about that about Bruce. One was his trip through the Bermuda Triangle, and then a month after his experience, he took his girlfriend out on a night flight from Miami over the city and over the Atlantic, because she'd never been in a small plane at night and see the stars. And they were out, and he was coming out towards the area actually where his experience had happened, when they see this orange light in the distance, and they're watching it, and it starts to get bigger and bigger, and it's coming right at them. And it's he can see this craft, and he says it looks very metallic. He turns as much as he can, but he's sure it's going to crash right into him, and then boom, it's gone. Like, where'd it go? It just disappeared, or went straight up, or what? But it looked like an orange craft with a kind of dome top, and so that experience happened a month afterwards. And so Joe McMoneagle did a remote viewing on it. Now, he didn't know what the hell was in that envelope, but it was about that experience, and he described an abduction experience with the airplane being actually captured by the UFO.
Oh, wow.
I don't know.
And what did he describe then about the flight over Bimini?
Yeah, what was
Do you remember?
Yeah, it was very technical stuff about the atmosphere and
why the fog clung to the plane. I mean, it was
fog clinging to the plane, and in fact, that's what Bruce calls electronic fog. And because what happened is this fog, he seems like he's flying through this massive fog, which I described as that yellow mass. But what really happened was the radar didn't show any fog out there at all. That it was just a clear day, but it was like this fog was clinging to the plane, like maybe a quarter mile around the plane and traveling with the plane. And the reason he came to that belief is that he could see a hole above the plane and below the plane in the fog, and he's flying along. How could this hole continue to be
moving with him?
And above? And what he realizes, this fog was clinging to the plane and moving with him.
Yeah.
And it's somehow part of the experience. And he called that electronic fog.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
One thing for sure, Bruce is pretty psychic now. Some of the, he feels that these experiences he's had have really opened him up intuitively, I think.
Yeah, he's had some other UFO experiences as a result of that.
Yeah, I think I was watching that TV show. I think it's called Project Blue Book. And
Oh, yeah,
I think, I think the new season just started this week or last week. And
Yeah, I just read that yesterday. Yeah.
yeah, and I remember seeing in that TV show that when someone had an experience where they were maybe in a car and there might be some sort of UFO where like they're getting abducted or something weird happens with the car, that after that they're, you know, experiencing, they hear voices, they and not in a sense of where people would think, oh, you're just having multiple personalities, but really hearing, getting messages from other like frequencies, you know, tuned into other frequencies and tuning into, I guess, a radio station that most of us aren't tuned into.
right.
So that they actually put that in the show. And I love how, you know, media, our entertainment industry loves to inject a lot of truths with non-truths to really screw us up.
Yeah, I know. They just, you know, we wrote a book called Aliens in the Backyard, UFOs, Abductions, and Synchronicity, because we found that synchronicity is often a component in how some of these events unfold with abductions and encounters.
And we based it, the main story in that book was about a family living outside of Montreal in a rural area about 45 miles outside of Montreal. They would the man would get up about 5 o'clock in the morning. He would drive into Montreal, and he worked at an aeronautical industry company. And this one particular morning, he got up at 5 o'clock, and his dog usually went out the back door. And this time the dog just stood there and wouldn't go out. So he kind of nudged him out with his foot into the back, and he steps out and he sees these beams of light coming down in this farmer's field that's adjacent to his property. And he's watching these lights, strange lights, and there's like this energy inside these beams, and it's like it's circling around and like pulling up something from the earth, moving up to some object that he can't see above these beams. And so he goes and wakes up his wife and to see this, and she comes out and standing there, and suddenly there's a craft that comes into their backyard, like a saucer-shaped craft, but it's vertical.
Like a coin on its edge.
Yeah, coin on its edge, coming right into the backyard, coming right up towards them. And he turns to grab his dog to get in the house. He makes that turn, starts to reach, and the dog is covered with this gold beam of light. And that's the last thing he remembers. The next thing he knows, he's taking a shower, and his wife is sound asleep in bed. And he manages to continue with his day, go to work, but he doesn't know what happened to him. And he just has this like mental breakdown in his office, and he's very upset. Now, this is somebody who never believed in UFOs. He thought that if there was a such thing, he thought it was something from Hollywood, and if there was an actual thing of UFOs and aliens, that the U.S. military would have told us a long time ago. kind of naive idea, but so he's very upset by this experience, and then he starts having all these synchronicities related to this experience. Like he goes to his neighbor who lives maybe a couple blocks, would be normally a couple blocks away, almost eighth of a mile or something from his house, and also borders that field. And he asked the neighbor, did you see something yesterday? He knew they got up early in the morning too, and he asked the neighbor, did you see anything unusual yesterday morning out back? And he's talking to the man, and the woman, his wife, from another room says, Jocelyn, did you see a UFO? And he doesn't want to be considered a UFO or not. So he said, no, I think it might be just some kids on snowmobiles or something back there. And she says, no, you saw a UFO, didn't you? Because my cousin is a psychic medium, and he called me a couple of weeks ago and said that you're going to find out about a UFO right in your neighborhood there. And she said, I think he's kind of a crazy guy, and I didn't think much of it. But when you came to me, I knew that's what it was.
And the way he found us was he went to a bookstore, looking for a book, I guess, for additional information on what had happened to him that might help explain it. And he saw our synchronicity book, 7 Secrets of Synchronicity, that had been translated into French. And he bought it, and on the front of it, I know what it was. Yeah, he bought the book and then went home and looked up our blog. And what came up was a picture that was exactly what he had seen.
No, what happened is he went home and started reading the book, and then he Googled the term UFOs and synchronicity, and then a blog post that we had written came up, and in the image in the blog post was these beams of light coming down in a field with a craft up above it. And he said, at that point, he said, I knew. Then he realizes that he looks at the blog post and realizes the blog post is by the same people who wrote the book that he's reading. And so
that's when he got
that's when he got in touch with us, and that was the beginning of that story.
Oh wow, that's a cool synchronicity. Definitely, there's so many layers.
Right.
So many layers to that. So, it sounds to me, just from what they show on TV and what other people who've experienced, I guess they call them experiencers, that he was abducted and all his memories of that abduction are erased. So that's why he's lost that space of time.
Well, the thing is,
he had no missing time, though.
He had no missing time.
That was the weird thing.
He made it to work on time, and that was the odd thing.
Well, I mean, he's standing in a field, and the next thing he's in the shower and his wife's sleeping.
Right. Yeah. And he doesn't know what happened in that space. Or maybe.
So it's a missing experience of some sort.
Yeah, it's a missing experience of what happened, and it's like his mind was.
But for him, it was almost like time contracted too.
Yeah, maybe it was contracted or something. I don't know. It was odd, and he is very upset about it. And I haven't talked to him for a few years, and I was getting interested in calling him, getting back in touch with him. That happened in 2011 in February, so it's like the 9th anniversary, and we're starting a podcast ourselves very soon, and it's called the Mystical Underground. And I want to have him as a guest and go over that experience again
and see how his life has changed.
Yeah.
Oh wow! Well, that'll be that's a great name too, Mystical Underground. I love it.
Thank you.
And amazingly, it was available for a website too.
I know, right? That's always the trick these days.
Yeah, it is.
So, it's been a pleasure to have you guys on. Can you let our audience know what your website is, how they can reach out to you? Maybe they have questions for you that you could answer.
We're always collecting stories too. Probably the best place to get in touch with us is blog.synchroncities.com. That's where we post almost daily. Or phenomena111.com, which is where we have our synchro books listed, and there's a contact form there too.
Okay. Well, we'll leave all those in the show notes. And you've got a new book coming out. Is it out yet, or?
Yes, it's out. It's just the print is coming out. We hope by the end of the month. The print version, the ebook's out.
Yeah, it's called Phenomena. What's the subtitle?
Harnessing your psychic powers. Yeah.
I was just going to say, do people send you their examples of synchronicities?
Oh yeah, they do. And a lot of times, they'll post them in the blog, and then we follow up. But you can. One of the weird things, you could walk to a dog park and start talking to people, and if you mention the word synchronicity, they may not know what it is. But as soon as you mention meaningful coincidence, Oh, I have that all the time.
Yeah, we go to take our dog to a dog park, and he's wiggling around behind us now. He's ready to go. And Trish goes up to people and asks them if they have had spirit contact. And surprisingly, a lot of people say yes. It's amazing.
And they love talking about it. They love it when somebody asks. You know,
I'm very surprised when somebody just walks up and asks that question. Usually, it follows that. Because of a relative, mention of a relative who died recently. And she said, have you had any contact?
Oh, that's awesome. It's, I think these days there's more and more people experiencing these sorts of phenomenon more frequently.
Absolutely.
It definitely seems to be an uptick. Yeah. Keep you guys busy.
Yeah, really.
Well, thanks so much for coming on the Enlighten Up podcast. It was a pleasure to have you both on here.
And thank you.
Thank you.
It was so nice. Fun. Yeah. And thank you to our audience again for being with us. It was a pleasure. We'll be back with you all next week. Bye.
Thank you all for joining our show. We appreciate you tuning in and supporting us. If any of you have any questions you would like answered on the show or any guests that you would like to hear on our show, please email that information to us at info@enlightenup.us or send us a voice message using the Anchor app. There's a super cool feature on there that allows you to send us a message or ask us a question with a touch of a button right from the app. And please continue to support us by following us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. And if you haven't checked out Nicole's channel on YouTube yet, head on over there for some more insight from her, or you can visit her website, inflexibleme.com, where you can book a personal coaching session or a tarot reading, watch some of her most informative videos, or you can sign up for her newsletter. And if you're interested in some light language healing, head to my YouTube channel, lisaloveslove.com, or send me an email to lisa@lisaloveslove.com to inquire about your own personal reading. Thank you again for joining us and supporting us, and we'll be back with you all next week.